Hello again, parishioners from Holy Trinity Parish. I'm speaking to you from McKenna Hall in front of the mission statement of our parish. As you can see, the statement reads, "We are a Jesuit parish that welcomes all to accompany one another in Christ, celebrate God's love, transform lives." In this talk, after informing you of some of the highlights of our recent parish survey, I intend to address three concerns related to our mission of welcome and accompaniment, which have been sort of in the news this past week. The issues are the institution of a 100 million reparation fund created by the Society of Jesus in recognition of the Jesuits' part in the sinfulness of owning and selling slaves. Second, the anxieties which many of our Asian American citizens and parishioners are experiencing as a result of the recent shootings in Atlanta and the ongoing harassment and prejudice they have felt in parts of the nation. Third, I wish to speak of the anguish and the anger which many of us have felt, especially those parishioners who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, or their friends and relatives, in reaction to a recent statement about priests not being allowed to bless same-sex marriages. These guidelines were promulgated formally by the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith. Each one of the issues raises the challenges of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which our mission statement implies, indeed demands. It was on March 13th, 2020, 54 weeks ago, that after a consultation with our parish staff and the Archdiocese of Washington, I ordered the parish closed for live masses. It was not until the end of August, 5 months later, that we gradually began to open for Sunday and later weekday masses. As a result, for more than a year now, a vast number of parishioners have not been in our church, nor have received the Holy Eucharist for more than a year. It has been a long journey, hasn't it? Through the reception of vaccinations and the ways in which American citizens have patiently followed the rigorous restrictions, there are indications that we are slowly but surely moving out of this deadly pandemic. So as to ascertain a sense of how parishioners like yourselves feel the degrees you would like us to open in the stages and other considerations, we conducted a parish-wide survey 2 weeks ago. The results are available on our website, but here are some of the highlights. A total of 538 of you responded to the survey, a robust statistical number to be sure. Thank you very much for taking the time to do the survey. 40% of the respondents were over the age of 65. 71% were female. 320 indicated they have been vaccinated at least once, and another 200 have an appointment or plan to get vaccinated. Only 4 parishioners replied that they do not intend to get vaccinated. The vast majority of parishioners, 87%, appreciated the various ways the parish has been spiritually nurtured, especially through online prayer services, virtual gatherings, and the daily audio homilies and reflections. More than 75% of you noted that you listen to them daily. Let me take this moment to thank my lay and Jesuit colleagues for their dedicated and creative labors in taking turns to provide this ministry. By the way, I would guess that 95% of us never even heard of the word Zoom until the pandemic happened. What would we have done this past year without Zoom or other internet services? The survey also indicated that many of you are requesting for more weekly and Sunday masses. After Easter, we hope to fulfill this request, but due to cleaning constraints, we will not yet resume the regular schedule. I should also note that at present, St. Ignatius Chapel is being sanded and shellacked for use, hopefully sometime later in the spring. As for worshiping, 143 replied that they regularly go to Mass in person at Holy Trinity Parish, while 348 replied that they follow the live stream Sunday Mass. 20% said that they attend another parish, which is a concern that makes me wonder, when we do reopen, will we lose those parishioners? Finally, there was one question which indicated a request for regular parish updates from the pastor. Well, actually, folks, besides giving monthly updates to the parish council, the finance council, the development council, as well as 2 Holy Trinity Parish school committees, I do give weekly updates on Sunday morning at the 11 o'clock Coffee and Donuts groups. I invite you to tune in at the 11 o'clock Coffee and Donut group each Sunday, where weekly updates are given in and I respond to questions from parishioners. The Zoom link is available on our website. Now let me turn to last week's public announcement concerning the formation of the Descendants, Truth and Reconciliation Foundation. You may remember in 2018, the Jesuit provincials of the United States, in furthering the findings of the Georgetown University Task Force on the Early American Jesuits and Slavery, entered a formal dialogue process with leadership of the descendant community of the 272 people enslaved and sold by the Society of Jesus at Georgetown in 1838. According to the letter from our Jesuit provincial, Father Joseph O'Keefe, the Descendants, Truth and Reconciliation Foundation was created as an outgrowth of this dialogue. The foundation represents a partnership between the descendants of those who were sold and the present Society of Jesus leadership. This historic partnership seeks to engage, promote, support programs and activities that highlight trust, accelerate racial healing and reconciliation, and advance racial justice and equality in America. Moreover, it seeks to invest in the education of descendants of Jesuit slaveholding, as well as to provide support to impoverished, elderly, and infirm descendants. Sadly, as members of our historic committee have researched and written about on our website, members of Holy Trinity Parish owned and sold slaves. Certainly, the recent civil protests surrounding injustices and prejudice towards African Americans have a long and traumatic history. I should note that in order to further our awareness of the injustices historically and presently experienced by many African Americans, members of our new Jesuit East Province have been encouraged by our superiors to read and reflect upon, as part of our Lenten practices, a variety of articles and books on the topic. One of the books which has enlightened and inspired me has been the recent best-selling book by Isabel Wilkerson titled Caste: The Origins of Our Discontents. I recommend it for your reading. One of the many challenges this seminal work made upon me was the call for radical empathy, by which we must meet the challenges of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. Similarly, the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness may be applied to the discrimination and prejudices experienced by our Asian American brothers and sisters. The recent shootings in Atlanta, in which 6 Asian Americans were killed and others wounded, represent just one of the many recent incidents against Asian Americans. As one citizen noted in response to the Atlanta shootings, quote, "We're just tired. We're tired of being scapegoated for the pandemic," unquote. Nearly 3,800 incidents were reported over the course of roughly a year during the pandemic. It's a significantly higher number than last year's count of about 2,600 hate incidents nationwide. Over the span of 5 months, women made up a far number share of the reports, at 60% compared to men, who made up 29% of the respondents. Moreover, anti-Asian hate crimes surged by 149% in 16 of our nation's largest cities. This might stop, as President Biden has enunciated recently on several occasions. Last week, in response to the Atlanta shootings, I reached out to a couple of our Asian American parishioners and learned of their anxiety. And countless other Asian Americans, just leaving their home requires a new routine and a mental shift that prioritizes safety and survival. It's coupled with a subtle fear, wondering if they or a loved one will become the next victim. Besides our prayer for our sisters and brothers, we must recognize the words, the structural changes which are needed. This past weekend, Archbishop Gregory, in a keynote speech, addressed his concerns for the Asian American when he stated that the tragedy combined with the, quote, hatred and violence that Asian Americans have endured with increased intensity since the beginning of the global pandemic reminds us that we still have serious racial problems that continue to plague our national identity and harmony, unquote. Thirdly, I want to speak to you about the confusion and pain many of us are experiencing over the recent statement by the Congregation of the Doctrine and Faith and signed by Pope Francis. On Sunday afternoon, members of our LGBTQ plus community met to discuss their experiences after learning of the Vatican statement. One member of the group wrote to me and stated, quote, "There is a deep feeling of betrayal and shock that this came from the Pope. So many of us have been lifted up by the changes in his tone regarding LGBTQ folks. Quote, who am I to judge, unquote, and by our perceptions of his papacy as changing the conversation. That this felt a bit like a punch to the gut, and members expressed some deep disappointment in him personally. Our members are experiencing at least these different ways and more personal disappointment in Francis, and a feeling of betrayal on one hand and more general return to dismissal of anger and the overall institutional reality of the Catholic Church, unquote. They also talked about the ideas of a more opening session in other members of the parish could hear some of their stories. With that suggestion in mind, I've asked the parish council and my colleagues in our pastoral associated planning team to consider the possibility of having listening sessions similar to the ones we had 3 years ago when the sexual abuse scandal involving Conor McCarrick was first disclosed. Of course, this process will need further discussion, but I raise it for consideration and parish-wide conversations. Finally, these concerns and challenges have the potential to enlarge our community's mission statement in a concrete way, our vision of our identity and solidarity with the poor and oppressed, and expand our community by accompanying the marginalized. Indeed, as some commentators are calling for, a response that's just not sympathetic, nor even just empathetic, but a radical empathy. We, as a parish community, stand by all who experience discrimination and marginalization in any way. May our final week of Lent, may our Holy Week, whereby we identify with the passion of Jesus Christ, be that opportunity for us to become more compassionate and to stretch out to the marginalized who need our help and to whom we are called by Jesus Christ.